If you've ever found the idea of building a gaming PC daunting, or the idea of cramming the components into a tiny ITX case to be off-putting, then this could be the video for you. Because tonight we'll be looking at just how easy it is to put together a compact and portable gaming PC that can play any game, anywhere, yet won't break the bank. And to make this build accessible to anyone, we've chosen easily obtainable items that are available off the shelf. And we're going to put links to everything that we've used in this build in the description down below so that you can do the same at home if you wish. And the first thing you're going to need when you're building an ITX PC is obviously the case. And it's incredibly important to consider the case first so you can plan your build around the size constraints that each case has. This is particularly important when you're using an ITX build like this one today. And with this in mind, we've chosen the S300 ITX compact case. This 8-litre PC case is a great price at just £80 in the UK. It's very solid, and as a carry handle, it makes it very easy to lug around, whilst retaining a 2.5 slot 305mm graphics card to make a mid-range gaming PC easily possible. The graphics card we chose for this mid-range build is the RTX 4070 from Zotac. This is a compact, power-efficient card perfect for high refresh 1440p gaming experience. Now, if I was buying this again today, I would get the super version, which is about the same price as the 4070 was when it launched, for far better performance. And this case is available in white or black. It also has a USB-A and a USB-C port on the side of the case, plus it benefits from good ventilation. With regards to the fan, you can fit 120mm and 80mm slim fans in the bottom. Now, I've noticed there is room that you could squeeze a 90mm slim fan at the top, but there is no mounting area for that, so you would have to jerry-rig it yourself. But for this build, as it's not overly power hungry, we're going to stick with just a 120mm slim fan in the base, which will do the job. And for this ITX rig, we've decided to go for an Intel build. And it is always easiest to build up the motherboard with the CPU, RAM and SSD outside of the case before screwing it back into place. And the motherboard we've chosen is the MSI B760i Edge. This is a mid-range motherboard with all the features you're going to require in a gaming build, such as 2 M.2 SSD slots, Wi-Fi 6, plenty of USB-Cs and a USB-A at the rear, as well as 2.5GB Ethernet. For the SSDs, we've used a high-performance SN850X 2TB for the primary drive. And for the rear slot, we've put in a cheaper Crucial P3 Plus, which is not as fast as the SN850X, but is perfect for game storage. For the CPU, we're going to use the Intel i5 13600K, which is one of my favourite gaming CPUs. Now, obviously, you could get the new 14th gen version, the 14600K, but as it performs almost identically to the 13600K, get whichever one is cheaper. Also, if you want to save some money here, you can get by with just the i5 13400, which will also run a lot cooler, but nowhere near as fast. With regards to the CPU cooler, the only problem with this ITX case is there isn't a great deal of room for an actual large air cooler. Now, we've decided to go for the Thermalright AXP90 X47 full copper heatsink. Now, this is a great low profile heatsink that will do a good job with this i5 in a gaming load. They will probably run hot if you're maxing out all the cores on the CPU. And because it is a compact low profile cooler, you're not going to have any problems fitting it in this motherboard, even if you've got large VRM heatsinks around the CPU socket. Installing the low profile cooler is straightforward, but can be a little fiddly. You're going to need to apply some thermal paste to that CPU, then gently align up and lower the heatsink onto the motherboard, whilst holding the heatsink and the motherboard together, turn it over, insert the back plate and screw it down. Lastly, you just need to plug in that fan header onto the motherboard itself and tidy away the cable. Now, this motherboard has DDR4 RAM slots to make this build that little bit cheaper. Now, we've populated a 64GB Corsair 3600MHz RAM kit in here. Now, 64GB is overkill for gaming build, and I'd recommend you use 32GB, but we happen to have this in the studio, so we're going to max ours out. With our empty case, the first thing we need to do now is install our slim 120mm Corsair fan, and we bought it in white to match this build. And also, before we put the motherboard in, we just need to make sure the GPU ribbon cable is slid through the gap at the top of the board, as this is very difficult to do once you've actually installed the motherboard in place. And with our newly built motherboard, we're going to gently lower that into the case and screw it down securely using the 4 screws. We then plug in the front header panel, the USB-A, the USB-C headers, and the 120mm slim fan. And then lastly, we insert the GPU ribbon cable into the PCI slots. With this being an ITX case, we do need to make sure we buy an SFX power supply, and for this, we've chosen the Corsair SF750. This is a premium PSU, which includes modular braided cables, and is incredibly quiet, and you can even power the heaviest gaming builds with this PSU. We're going to attach the SF750 to the bracket provided by the case, then thread the power supply cable into place and turn on the power switch on that PSU. Make sure you remember to do this, otherwise it's very difficult to get to after it's installed. The PSU and bracket is then lowered into place and screwed down onto the case. We engage in a quick session of cable tidying and plug in the motherboard ATX power and CPU cable. Next up is the GPU riser cable on the reverse of the motherboard. We screw this down to the case with the screws provided, and we can now plug in the power cables into the GPU before seating it into the PCI slot and screwing it down. We've now fully built our PC. All that is left to do is put on the side panels and screw them down, and we've got a fully built PC. With the PC built, it is time to sit back and enjoy some gaming. Now with this RTX 4070 and an i5 13600K combo, we'll be able to run most AAA games on my 1440p monitor at this high refresh rate of 140Hz. We started with the finals, which I'm currently addicted to, and at 1440p high settings, it's just no problems at all. The frame rate was always well over 100 and usually sitting between 130 to 150 frames per second. Now this game does use a fair amount of CPU for the destructible terrain, so the 13600K can get quite toasty in this case. But considering I am running the fans quite quietly, I'm pretty impressed. Moving over to Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, which uses less CPU, you can see that this 13600K hardly heats up at all, even with this tiny little cooler. And again, 1440p high settings is absolutely no problem with this build. Looking at the GPU temperatures in Modern Warfare 2, which fully utilises this 4070, we're getting just over 70 degrees centigrade, which again for such a compact build is really quite impressive. And again, I'm running stock settings with a pretty quiet decibel on both the CPU and this actual GPU. Talking of the fan noise, with all the fans in this tiny little case, it sits at about 46 decibels. Now this is at its standard settings. You can adjust it to be louder if you want cooler temps, or even quieter if you're not bothered about the temps at all. But personally, I think this sort of moderate sort of 46 decibels whilst gaming is absolutely perfect. And if you're ever used to a gaming laptop, this is very quiet in comparison. So just to round out the games, we tried a bit of Forza 5, which was absolutely broke no sweat at all, running this at its 1440p maximum settings. And then we ran through the Cyberpunk benchmarks, again, 1440p with ray tracing on, and there's just no problems at all with this i5 and 4070. This is an absolutely perfect mid-range combo. So there we are, our first mid-range gaming build with a tiny little ITX setup. Most people do think it is very daunting building a PC, but if you buy the right case and the right components, it's actually very straightforward. Now this case is not going to break the bank, but it does a really good job and it's really easy to work in. Plus you've got this lovely carry handle, so if you are moving from place to place, it's very easy to transport this case. Perfect for an ITX setup. Now as always, all the links for all the parts we've used will be in the description down below, and if you've got any questions, pop it in the comment section and I will get back to you. And lastly, thanks for watching.